On a warm November morning in 1999, on the island of Oahu, Hawaii, a woman named Lisa Kimmell walked out of her apartment in the quiet suburb of Wahiawa and never came home. She was 23 years old, a clerk at the Navy Exchange, known for her punctuality and her habit of calling her mother every Sunday evening without fail. Her car was found 3 days later in the parking lot of a shopping center 7 miles from her home, keys still in the ignition, her purse on the passenger seat, wallet untouched. Inside the vehicle, investigators found a single drop of blood on the driver's seat that didn't match Lisa's type. No witnesses came forward. No body was discovered. For 24 years, Lisa Kimmell's disappearance remained one of Hawaii's most baffling mysteries, a case that seemed to vanish as completely as the woman herself. But in January 2023, a phone call from a woman who had been silent for more than 2 decades would shatter the stillness of that cold case, leading investigators to a truth so close to home that those who knew Lisa best had been living alongside it all along. What happened to Lisa Kimmell, and why did it take nearly a quarter century for the truth to surface? Wahiawa sits in the central plateau of Oahu, nestled between the Wahiawa and Kula mountain ranges, a town that exists in the shadow of more famous Hawaiian destinations. It's not the Hawaii of postcards and tourist brochures. There are no pristine beaches here, no luxury resorts with infinity pools overlooking turquoise water. Wahiawa is a working-class town, home to military families stationed at nearby Schofield Barracks, a place where the sounds of helicopters from Wheeler Army Airfield become part of the daily soundtrack. The air smells of red earth and eucalyptus, of rain that falls suddenly in the afternoons and clears just as quickly. In 1999, the town had a population of roughly 17,000 people, the kind of community where neighbors knew each other's schedules, where the same faces appeared at the Zippy's restaurant every morning for coffee, where absence was noticed. Lisa Kimmell had moved to Wahiawa 2 years earlier, following her then-boyfriend, a Navy sailor named Derek Pacheco, who had been stationed at Pearl Harbor. She was originally from Sacramento, California, the youngest of 3 sisters, a woman her family described as organized to the point of compulsion. She kept a day planner that she consulted constantly, wrote shopping lists on index cards, and never missed an appointment. Her apartment was a small 1-bedroom unit on California Avenue, a street lined with modest 2-story buildings painted in faded pastels. She worked the early shift at the Navy Exchange, clocking in at 7 in the morning 5 days a week, selling electronics and household goods to military families. Her coworkers said she was friendly but private, the kind of person who would listen to others' problems but rarely shared her own. Clears throat. Derek Pacheco was 26 years old in November 1999, a machinist's mate 3rd class, muscular and quiet, with a tribal tattoo that wrapped around his left bicep. Those who knew him said he was intense, the kind of man who didn't smile easily, who seemed to carry something heavy behind his eyes. He and Lisa had been together for 3 years, living separately by choice, though he stayed at her apartment 3 or 4 nights a week. Friends said the relationship had its tensions. A neighbor in Lisa's building, an elderly woman named Margaret Tanaka, later told investigators she had heard raised voices from Lisa's apartment on more than one occasion, though she couldn't make out the words. The walls in those buildings were thin enough that sound traveled, but Mrs. Tanaka said she minded her own business, as people in Wahiawa tended to do. November 18, 1999, was a Thursday. The morning broke cool and gray, clouds sitting low over the mountains, the kind of weather that promised rain but hadn't yet delivered. Lisa woke at 5:30, as she did every workday morning. Her alarm clock, a small Sony model with red digital numbers, sat on the nightstand beside a half-empty glass of water and a paperback romance novel, bookmark inserted at page 147. She showered, dressed in her Navy exchange uniform, navy blue polo shirt and khaki pants, and made coffee in the small kitchen that overlooked the parking lot. Derek was not there that night. He had stayed at the barracks, according to later statements, because he had an early formation and didn't want to make the drive from Wahiawa at 5 in the morning. Lisa left her apartment at 6:20. Mrs. Tanaka, who was an early riser and often sat by her window with her own coffee, saw Lisa walk to her car, a white 1996 Honda Accord with a dent in the rear bumper from a minor parking lot accident 6 months earlier. Lisa carried her purse, a brown leather bag, and a travel mug of coffee. She got into the car, started the engine, and pulled out of the parking lot. Mrs. Tanaka watched the taillights disappear down California Avenue. It was the last confirmed sighting of Lisa Kimmell alive. She never arrived at work. By 7:15, her supervisor at the Navy Exchange, a woman named Patricia Reyes, noticed Lisa's absence. This was unusual. Lisa had never been late without calling, not once in 2 years of employment. Patricia tried Lisa's home phone. No answer. She tried again at 7:30, then at 8. Still nothing. At 9 o'clock, Patricia called Derek Pacheco's barracks. The duty officer who answered said Derek was on base, working in the machine shop. He would pass along the message. Derek called the Navy Exchange at 9:40. Patricia Reyes would later recall his tone as calm, almost flat. He said he didn't know where Lisa was, that he hadn't spoken to her since the previous afternoon. He would check her apartment after his shift ended at 3. But Derek didn't wait until 3. Records would later show that he left the base at 10:15 that morning, signing out on a special Liberty chit, telling his supervisor that there was a family emergency. He drove to Lisa's apartment. Mrs. Tanaka saw him arrive at approximately 10:45. She watched him let himself in with his own key, watched him emerge 20 minutes later and stand in the parking lot, looking around as if searching for something. He made a phone call on his cell phone, a brief conversation. Then he got back in his truck, a dark green Ford Ranger, and drove away. The official missing person report wasn't filed until that evening. Derek called the Honolulu Police Department at 6:30, more than 12 hours after Lisa failed to show up for work. The responding officer, a patrol sergeant named Kenneth Lau, met Derek at Lisa's apartment. Derek showed him inside. Nothing appeared disturbed. The bed was made. Dishes were washed and stacked in the drainer beside the sink. Lisa's purse was missing, as was her car, but her keys should have been in the purse, Derek said. Her day planner was on the kitchen counter, open to November 18th. There was an entry written in her neat handwriting. Work 7-3, dinner with D, 6 p.m. Derek stood in the kitchen, hands in his pockets, and told Sergeant Lau that Lisa had been stressed lately, that maybe she needed some time alone, that she might have driven up to the North Shore to clear her head. Sergeant Lau noted Derek's demeanor as unusually calm for a man whose girlfriend had been missing for 12 hours. The next morning, Friday, November 19th, the search began in earnest. Lisa's car was the priority. A white Honda Accord is not an uncommon vehicle, but investigators issued a bolo be on the lookout to all units across Oahu. Lisa's sister, Karen, flew in from Sacramento that afternoon, frantic and exhausted, and stayed with Derek at his barracks because Lisa's apartment felt too empty, too full of questions. Karen would later say that Derek seemed helpful, concerned, but there was something she couldn't quite name, something in the way he kept repeating the same details about Lisa's stress, about her need for space, as if he were reading from a script. Clears throat. On Sunday, November 21st, 3 days after Lisa's disappearance, a security guard at the Wahiawa shopping center noticed a white Honda Accord parked in the far corner of the lot, away from the main entrance. The car had been there for at least 2 days, he thought, maybe longer. He called it in. Honolulu police arrived at 11:30 in the morning. The car was unlocked, keys in the ignition, purse on the passenger seat. Lisa's wallet contained her driver's license, $43 in cash, and her Navy Exchange employee ID. Her day planner was on the floor of the passenger side, pages bent, and on the driver's seat, investigators found a small stain, roughly the size of a quarter, dark reddish-brown. It was blood. The lab would later confirm it was type O negative. Lisa Kimmell was type A positive. The shopping center was less than 7 miles from Lisa's apartment, a 10-minute drive. Investigators canvassed the area, showing Lisa's photo to store employees and nearby residents. No one remembered seeing her. No one remembered seeing the car arrive. Surveillance cameras covered the main entrance of the shopping center but not the back lot where the Honda was found. Detectives expanded the search. They brought in cadaver dogs. They walked the routes between Lisa's apartment and the Navy Exchange, between the shopping center and every location Derek Pacheco said Lisa might have gone. They found nothing. The community responded as small communities do. Volunteers organized search parties, combing through the pineapple fields that surrounded Wahiawa, walking the trails that led up into the Kula Mountains. Local news stations ran Lisa's photo on the evening broadcasts, asking anyone with information to come forward. A tip line was established. Calls came in, dozens of them, sightings of women who looked like Lisa, rumors of arguments overheard, but none led anywhere concrete. Lisa's family printed flyers, taped them to telephone poles and store windows. Her face looked out from every corner of Wahiawa, smiling in a photo taken at a 4th of July barbecue 6 months earlier, wearing a red tank top, hair pulled back, sunglasses on her head. Detectives focused on Derek Pacheco. This is standard procedure in missing person cases. The intimate partner is always the first thread to pull. They interviewed him formally on November 23rd. He came to the station willingly, accompanied by a Navy lawyer, though he was not under arrest, not even officially a suspect. The interview lasted 3 hours. Derek repeated the timeline he had given before. He had last seen Lisa on the afternoon of November 17th, Wednesday, when he stopped by her apartment after work. They had talked about dinner plans for Thursday night. She seemed fine, he said, maybe a little tired, but fine. He stayed at the barracks Wednesday night because of his early formation Thursday morning. He didn't speak to her Thursday morning. He found out she was missing when her supervisor called. He went to check her apartment during his lunch break, found it empty, and reported her missing that evening. Detectives asked about the relationship. Derek said it was good, that they had normal disagreements, nothing serious. They asked if Lisa had ever mentioned wanting to leave to go back to California. Derek said no, that she liked Hawaii, liked her job. They asked about life insurance. Derek said there was none. They asked if he knew Lisa's blood type. Derek said he didn't. When detectives told him about the blood found in Lisa's car, blood that wasn't hers, Derek's expression didn't change. He said he didn't know how it got there, that maybe she had given someone a ride, that maybe someone had cut themselves. His voice remained steady throughout. But there were inconsistencies, small fractures in the timeline that didn't quite align. Derek said he left the base at 3 o'clock on Thursday to check Lisa's apartment, but base security records showed him signing out at 10:15 in the morning. When confronted with this discrepancy, Derek paused for several seconds before saying he must have misremembered, that the day had been stressful, that yes, he had left earlier because he was worried. Detectives asked why he didn't call police immediately when he found the apartment empty at 10:45. Derek said he thought Lisa might have gone to run errands, that he didn't want to overreact. They asked about the dinner reservation. Derek had mentioned that he and Lisa were supposed to have dinner Thursday night at 6. Detectives called local restaurants. No reservations under Lisa's name or Derek's. Derek said it wasn't a formal reservation, just a plan to eat somewhere, maybe at the food court in the mall. Deputies whispered quietly among themselves during breaks in the interview. The calm in Derek's voice felt off to them, rehearsed in a way that set their instincts humming. Forensic technicians processed Lisa's apartment and her car. They found no signs of struggle in the apartment. No blood, no broken items, nothing out of place. The car was more complicated. The blood on the driver's seat was sent for DNA analysis, a process that in 1999 took weeks. Fingerprints were lifted from the interior, the steering wheel, the door handles. Most belonged to Lisa. Several belonged to Derek, which was not surprising given that he drove her car occasionally. But there were other prints, unidentified, likely belonging to previous owners or service technicians. The car's odometer reading gave detectives pause. Lisa's apartment was 6.3 miles from her workplace. The shopping center where her car was found was 6.8 miles from her apartment. The odometer showed that the car had been driven approximately 14 miles since Lisa had last filled the tank 2 days before her disappearance. That was consistent with her driving to and from work once, and then to the shopping center. But if she drove to the shopping center on Thursday morning, why? And if she didn't, who did? Weeks passed. The blood analysis came back. Type O negative, no match in the system. DNA comparison confirmed it was not Lisa's. It was male DNA. Derek Pacheco agreed to provide a DNA sample voluntarily. It was not a match. The DNA belonged to someone else, an unknown male. This should have shifted suspicion away from Derek, but investigators remained uneasy. Something about the case didn't sit right. The car was too clean, too deliberately placed. The purse left behind, wallet intact, suggested this wasn't a robbery. The blood suggested violence, but the absence of a body suggested planning. The investigation slowed as winter turned to spring. Leads dried up. The tip line went quiet. Lisa's family returned to California except for her sister Karen, who stayed for 3 months, walking the streets of Wahiawa, asking questions, refusing to believe that her sister had simply vanished. But eventually, even Karen had to go home. The case remained open, but active leads were exhausted. Detectives moved on to other cases, though Lisa's file stayed on their desks, a reminder of the questions that had no answers. Derek Pacheco remained in Hawaii, continued his service in the Navy. Those who knew him said he seemed to carry on normally, showed up for work, went out with friends from the base, didn't speak much about Lisa unless asked. When asked, he said he hoped she would be found, that he missed her, that he thought about her every day. His words were appropriate, the kind of things a grieving boyfriend should say. But those who have ever doubted someone you love, who have felt the dissonance between the words spoken and the truth unspoken, would have recognized something in Derek's eyes, a guardedness that suggested he was protecting something he couldn't afford to reveal. Clears throat. 4 years passed, then 6, then 10. The file on Lisa Kimmell's disappearance gathered dust in a storage facility in downtown Honolulu, one of hundreds of cold cases that haunt the islands, stories that began with a person and ended with a question mark. Lisa's family held a memorial service in 2005, 6 years after her disappearance, a small gathering at a church in Sacramento. They bought a headstone with no grave beneath it, a marker that read Lisa Marie Kimmell, 1976-1999, forever in our hearts. But they never stopped hopping. Karen called the Honolulu Police Department every few months, asking if there were any updates, any new leads. The answer was always the same. No, ma'am, we're sorry. The case is still open. Derek Pacheco left the Navy in 2004 after his enlistment ended. He moved to Las Vegas, Nevada, where he worked as a mechanic at a motorcycle shop. He married in 2007, a woman named Jennifer who worked as a dental hygienist. They had a daughter in 2009, a girl they named Sophia. From the outside, Derek's life appeared settled, ordinary, the kind of middle-class stability that many people achieve. But those who knew him in Las Vegas, co-workers at the shop, neighbors in the apartment complex where he lived, said he was a private man, friendly enough but never deeply connected, the kind of person who revealed nothing about his past. When someone asked him about Hawaii, he said he had been stationed there in the Navy, that it was beautiful but expensive, and he changed the subject. But inside the home Derek shared with Jennifer, something else was unfolding, a slow erosion of the life they were trying to build. Jennifer would later say that Derek had nightmares, that he woke in the night sweating, mumbling names she didn't recognize. She said he drank more than she thought was normal, not every day, but on certain nights, anniversaries of dates he never explained. He would sit in the garage with a bottle of bourbon and wouldn't come to bed until 3 in the morning. She asked him once, early in the marriage, if something had happened in Hawaii, if there was something he needed to talk about. Derek's face had gone cold, she said, and he told her there were things in his past that were his alone to carry, that she should leave it alone. Their daughter, Sophia, was a bright child, curious and talkative, the kind of little girl who asked endless questions about everything she saw. But by the time she was 7 years old, in 2016, she had started having nightmares of her own. She drew pictures at school that concerned her teacher, images of a woman with long dark hair lying in a field, birds circling overhead. When the teacher asked Sophia about the drawings, the girl said she dreamed about the woman sometimes, that the woman was sad, that she couldn't find her way home. The teacher called Jennifer. Jennifer brought the drawings to a child psychologist, worried that her daughter was processing something traumatic, though Jennifer couldn't think of anything that would have caused such imagery. The psychologist said children sometimes absorbed anxieties from their environment, that Sophia might be picking up on tension in the home. The tension was real. By 2017, Derek and Jennifer's marriage was unraveling. They argued frequently about money, about Derek's drinking, about his emotional distance. Jennifer said she felt like she was living with a stranger, that Derek was there physically but absent in every other way. She asked for couples counseling. Derek refused. She asked him directly if he was hiding something. Derek said she was imagining things, that he was just tired, that work was stressful. But Jennifer didn't believe him anymore. For those who have ever doubted someone you love, who have felt the weight of suspicion growing in the silence between you, you understand the slow suffocation of a relationship built on secrets. In August 2018, 19 years after Lisa Kimmell vanished, Derek and Jennifer separated. Jennifer took Sophia and moved into an apartment across town. Derek stayed in the house. The divorce proceedings were straightforward, no major disputes over custody or assets. They agreed to joint custody of Sophia, alternating weeks. But during one of Sophia's stays with her father in November 2018, something happened that would eventually crack the case wide open. Sophia, now 9 years old, was playing in the garage while Derek worked on a motorcycle. She found a box on a high shelf, pulled it down and opened it. Inside were photographs, old photographs from Derek's time in Hawaii. Sophia looked through them, images of a younger version of her father in a Navy uniform, pictures of beaches and sunsets, and several photos of a woman with long dark hair and a bright smile. Sophia asked her father who the woman was. Derek, who had been bent over the motorcycle's engine, went very still. He stood up slowly, walked over to Sophia, and took the box from her hands. He said the woman was an old friend, no one Sophia needed to worry about. Sophia said the woman looked like the lady from her dreams, the sad lady in the field. Derek's hands, Sophia would later tell a therapist, were shaking when he closed the box. He put it back on the shelf and told Sophia not to touch his things. That night, Sophia called her mother, crying. She said her father had yelled at her, which wasn't entirely true, but she was frightened by the look on his face, by the way his whole body had gone rigid. Jennifer drove to Derek's house, picked up Sophia early, and for the first time, she began to think seriously about what her daughter's nightmares might mean. But Jennifer didn't go to the police. Not yet. She wasn't sure what to report, what to say. My daughter has nightmares about a woman and found photos of a woman in my ex-husband's garage. It felt insubstantial, circumstantial, the kind of thing that could be explained away. She talked to the child's psychologist again. The psychologist said that if Jennifer had genuine concerns about Derek's past, she should consider speaking to someone, but that dreams alone were not evidence of anything concrete. So Jennifer waited, watched, and tried to piece together fragments of a puzzle she couldn't fully see. It wasn't until 2022, 23 years after Lisa Kimmell disappeared, that the silence broke. Sophia was 13 years old, in 8th grade, taking a criminal justice class at her middle school. The class was doing a unit on cold cases, unsolved crimes that still haunted law enforcement. The teacher showed a documentary about missing persons cases in Hawaii. One of the cases featured was Lisa Kimmell's. There was her photo, the same woman from the pictures Sophia had found in the garage 4 years earlier. The documentary gave the basic facts. Lisa vanished in November 1999, car found abandoned, boyfriend questioned but never charged, case remains unsolved. Sophia sat very still in her classroom. When she got home, she told her mother what she had seen. Jennifer's stomach dropped. She asked Sophia to repeat everything slowly. Sophia described the documentary, described the woman's face, said it was the same woman from the photographs, the same woman from her dreams. Jennifer sat down on the couch, her hands shaking now, and asked Sophia if she was certain. Sophia was certain. Jennifer didn't sleep that night. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about Derek's nightmares, his silences, the 23 years that had passed since a woman he had dated disappeared without a trace. The next morning, Jennifer called the Honolulu Police Department. She asked to speak to someone about Lisa Kimmell's case. She was transferred 3 times before reaching a detective named Mark Taniguchi, one of the few officers still working cold cases from the 1990s. Jennifer explained who she was, explained about her ex-husband, explained about the photographs and her daughter's dreams and the documentary. Detective Taniguchi listened carefully. He asked Jennifer if she would be willing to make a formal statement. She said yes. He asked if Sophia would be willing to speak with him. Jennifer said she would ask her daughter, but she wanted to protect her, didn't want to traumatize her further. Detective Taniguchi said he understood that they would proceed carefully. The investigation reopened officially in January 2023. Detective Taniguchi pulled the old case file, boxes of documents and evidence that had been stored for more than 2 decades. He read through the interviews, studied the timeline, examined the forensic reports. The blood found in Lisa's car, type O-negative male DNA, was still preserved in the evidence locker. In 1999, DNA technology was in its infancy. But by 2023, advancements in genetic genealogy had made it possible to trace DNA through familial connections, to build family trees that led back to a source. Detective Taniguchi sent the sample to a private lab that specialized in forensic genealogy. Clears throat. The results came back in March 2023. The DNA was linked to a man named Raymond Kekoa, a 52-year-old resident of Maui who had died in 2015 of a heart attack. Raymond had no criminal record, no connection to Lisa Kimmell that investigators could find. But further digging revealed that Raymond Kekoa had been Derek Pacheco's roommate in the barracks at Schofield in 1999. They had served together, were friends, hung out on weekends. Raymond had left the Navy in 2001, moved to Maui, worked in construction, lived a quiet life. He had never married, had no children, and died alone in his apartment, undiscovered for 3 days. Detective Taniguchi contacted Raymond's family, a sister who lived in Hilo. She was shocked to hear from police, asked why they were interested in her brother, who had been gone for 8 years. Taniguchi explained that Raymond's DNA had been found in a missing persons case. The sister said Raymond had never mentioned anything like that he had never been in trouble, but she remembered something. She remembered that in late 1999, around Thanksgiving, Raymond had come home to Hilo for a visit. He had seemed off, she said, distracted and anxious. She asked him what was wrong. Raymond said he had a friend who was going through a hard time, that there were things he knew that he couldn't talk about. She didn't press him, but she remembered thinking that her brother seemed haunted by something. Taniguchi flew to Las Vegas in April 2023 to interview Derek Pacheco. He brought a partner, Detective Sarah Chen, and they arrived at Derek's house on a Tuesday morning without warning. Derek answered the door in a t-shirt and jeans, surprise crossing his face when he saw the badges. Taniguchi introduced himself, said they needed to talk about Lisa Kimmell. Derek's face went pale. He said he had already told the police everything he knew back in 1999, that he didn't know what else he could add. Taniguchi said new evidence had come to light, that they had some questions. Derek hesitated, then stepped aside and let them in. The interview lasted 5 hours. Derek sat on his couch, hands clasped between his knees, and listened as Taniguchi laid out the new findings. The DNA in Lisa's car belonged to Raymond Kekoa. Raymond was Derek's friend. Taniguchi asked Derek if he had any idea how Raymond's blood ended up in Lisa's car. Derek said no, that he didn't know, that maybe Raymond had borrowed the car at some point. Taniguchi said there was no record of that, no mention of Raymond in any of the original interviews. Derek said he didn't remember, that it had been 23 years. Taniguchi changed tactics. He talked about Sophia, about the nightmares, about the drawings, about the photographs. Derek's jaw tightened. He said his daughter was confused, that dreams meant nothing, that he had photos of lots of people from his time in Hawaii. Taniguchi leaned forward and said, "Derek, we know something happened. We know Raymond was involved. We know you were involved. Lisa's family deserves to know the truth. It's been 23 years. That's long enough." Derek was silent for a long time. The detectives waited. And then, slowly, Derek began to talk. He said Lisa had been planning to leave him. She had told him on November 17th, the day before she vanished. She said she was going back to California, that the relationship wasn't working, that she needed to start over. Derek said he panicked. He couldn't lose her. They argued that night at her apartment. The argument escalated. Derek said he didn't mean to hurt her, but he grabbed her, shook her, and she fell, hit her head on the corner of the kitchen counter. He said she was bleeding, unconscious. He called Raymond, his best friend, the only person he trusted. Raymond came to the apartment. They didn't know what to do. Raymond said they needed to move her, that if she died, Derek would go to prison. They wrapped her in a blanket, put her in her car. Raymond drove the car. Derek followed in his truck. Taniguchi interrupted. "Was she alive when you moved her?" Derek's voice was barely a whisper. "I thought she was. I don't know. She was breathing, I think, but she wasn't moving." They drove her to a remote area in the Kula Mountains, a place off the beaten path where hunters sometimes went but civilians rarely ventured. Derek said Raymond cut his hand on something, maybe a branch, maybe the car door when they were carrying Lisa out of the vehicle. That's how his blood got on the driver's seat. They carried her into the forest. Derek said they left her there, that he didn't know if she was alive or dead when they left. He said he and Raymond drove back to Wahiawa. Raymond parked Lisa's car at the shopping center, wiped down the surfaces, left it with the keys and purse inside to make it look like she had abandoned it. Then Raymond drove Derek back to his truck. They agreed never to speak of it again. Raymond transferred to a different unit 2 months later, and they barely saw each other after that. Taniguchi asked where exactly they had left Lisa. Derek said he couldn't remember, that it was dark, that he had blocked it out. Taniguchi pressed him. Derek said it was near a trail marker, maybe 2 miles up from the main road, but he couldn't be sure. Taniguchi asked if Derek had ever gone back. Derek said no, that he couldn't, that he spent 23 years trying to forget. Derek Pacheco was arrested on April 26, 2023, and charged with second-degree murder, kidnapping, and obstruction of justice. The news spread quickly. Local media in Las Vegas picked up the story, then national outlets. The Honolulu Police Department held a press conference. Detective Taniguchi stood at a podium and said that after 23 years, they believed they had finally found the person responsible for Lisa Kimmell's disappearance. He thanked the victim's family for their patience and perseverance. He thanked Sophia Pacheco for her bravery in coming forward. He did not go into details about the confession, saying that the case was still under investigation. Lisa's sister, Corinne, now 50 years old, spoke to reporters outside her home in Sacramento. She said she had waited half her life for this moment, that she had never stopped believing her sister's case would be solved. She said the hardest part was knowing that Lisa might have still been alive when she was taken into those mountains, that there might have been a chance to save her if only someone had called for help. She said she hoped Lisa hadn't suffered, hoped that the end had come quickly. In Las Vegas, Jennifer spoke to the press as well. She said she was devastated that she had lived with a man she thought she knew, raised a daughter with him, and never suspected the depth of the secret he had been carrying. She said she was proud of Sophia, that her daughter had been braver than she had. She said the nightmares made sense now, that Sophia had somehow known on some deep level that there was a truth buried in her father's past. Not everyone believed Derek's confession. Some of Derek's friends from the Navy, men who had served with him and considered him a good guy, said the confession must have been coerced, that Derek would never have hurt anyone. They pointed to the lack of a body, the fact that after 23 years, there was no physical evidence linking Derek to Lisa's death beyond his own words. But the DNA evidence, the testimony from Raymond's sister, the timeline that fit Derek's movements on the day Lisa disappeared, all of it built a case that prosecutors felt confident taking to trial. Derek's trial began in November 2023, almost exactly 24 years after Lisa vanished. It lasted 3 weeks. The prosecution presented the forensic evidence, the confession, the testimony from Jennifer and Sophia. Sophia, now 14, took the stand and described the photographs, the nightmares, the way her father's face had changed when she asked about the woman with dark hair. Defense attorneys argued that the confession had been made under duress, that Derek had been worn down by hours of questioning, that he had told detectives what they wanted to hear. They argued that without a body, without definitive proof of death, the case was built on speculation and circumstantial evidence. But the jury was convinced. On December 18, 2023, Derek Pacheco was found guilty of second-degree murder, kidnapping, and obstruction of justice. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The courtroom was silent when the verdict was read. Lisa's family, seated in the front row, held each other and cried. Jennifer and Sophia were not in attendance. Derek showed no emotion. He was led out of the courtroom in handcuffs, and he did not look back. The search for Lisa Kimmell's remains continued. In January 2024, search teams from the Honolulu Police Department, aided by volunteers and cadaver dogs, combed the Kula Mountains, focusing on the areas Derek had described. The terrain was difficult, dense with vegetation, slopes slick with mud. After 6 weeks of searching, on February 23, 2024, searchers found skeletal remains approximately 2.3 miles from a trailhead off Kamehameha Highway. Dental records confirmed the remains were Lisa's. She was brought home at last. Her family held a funeral in March, a small service attended by friends and relatives who had never stopped remembering her. She was buried in Sacramento, beneath a headstone that finally had a grave beneath it. Clears throat. The case of Lisa Kimmell is a reminder that some truths lie dormant for years, buried under layers of silence and fear, waiting for the right moment, the right voice, to bring them into the light. It is a story about the long shadow of violence, the way it stretches across decades, touching lives that hadn't yet begun when the crime was committed. Sophia Pacheco was born 10 years after Lisa disappeared, yet it was her voice, her persistence, that ultimately led to justice. Lisa Kimmell was 23 years old when she died. She was a daughter, a sister, a woman with a future that was stolen from her on a November morning in 1999. Her story mattered then, and it matters now. If this story mattered to you, subscribe and hit the bell. Share the episode. Someone somewhere may still be waiting to be heard.